Hi, Kelsey. Hi, Joan. You're muted. How are you doing?
Wonderful. How are you?
You're good, thank you.
Good. I was in a class all day today. So I've been sitting all day, but I went out to the garden a little bit of time. It's such a night. Hot but beautiful.
Yes, it really has been very nice the last week or so. So we do have a quorum now, Joe. Hey, Heather. Heather's here now.
Yes.
But we don't have a chair or a vice chair.
A chair or a vice chair.
Yeah. Looks like Andy's raising his hand. But Hojin is not going to make it tonight.
Okay.
Hey Trisha, can you call Miss Barbara for me, please, to see if she's coming on?
Sure. Let me just see.
Thanks.
Barbara should be joining us in just a second.
Okay, thank you. Okay, here comes Miss Barbara.
Thank you.
Miss Barbara, can you hear us?
Sure can. It looks like we have a quorum.
Okay, yes, Thomas 508, you may now start the meeting.
Okay, very good. It is 5:09 on Tuesday, July 14th, and the City of Sugar Land's Pike Parks Advisory Board meeting is called to order. Do we have any public comment this evening?
No, we do not.
Thank you. And moving on to item 3, workshop. Review of and discussion on the wayfinding design concepts for pedestrian and bicycle routes project. Monique Johnson, Transportation and Mobility Innovation Manager.
Thank you, Barbara, and good evening, everyone. I believe I've met a few of you before, but tonight I have a pretty exciting project that we've been working on for a few years now. It's been a long time coming, and so I'm excited to finally be able to bring something forward for you guys to look at. So I'll start with a little bit of background. The city actually developed a wayfinding program back in 2011. And so back then it focused primarily on wayfinding for roadways. So these are some of those large blue signs that you currently see along city roads. So like State Highway 6 has some. You'll see them on Sweetwater, and I believe Brook Street has some. So you'll see them throughout the city. So that was the original wayfinding program. And so what it did was it identified, all of those locations that you see, but it also helped us develop criteria for the major destinations. So like Town Square, First Colony Mall, Constellation Field. And the biggest thing that came out of that was a standard design for wayfinding signs. So back then, there was a planning document that was developed, and it was adopted by City Council. And so that's what resulted in the signs that you see today. Next slide. So in 2013, City Council adopted the Pedestrian and Bicycle Master Plan. And so within this plan, there were recommendations for wayfinding signage along the pedestrian and bicycle routes. Now, one of the things in this plan, there was a map that kind of showed general locations for wayfinding signs. But at the time, there really wasn't any guidance or any kind of design for these types of wayfinding signs. So there really wasn't any direction on how to proceed with implementing something like this. So what we did was next slide, please. So we started doing some research, and we looked at wayfinding in other cities. So what we found were that there are various types of wayfinding for pedestrian and bicycle routes. There are signs, there are posts, you may see in-pavement markers. I mean, there's all kinds of things out there. We've also started, working on some of the trail projects, the Ditch H Trail and the First Colony Trail projects. And so during that work with those projects, we found out that a lot of the levee improvement districts and the utility providers, they really didn't want anything vertical at the time along their ditches. And so especially these two projects, a lot of our trails run along the ditches. And so with that experience, we had to develop something that, another option that wasn't vertical. So something that could be in the pavement, but also accomplish what we're trying to do with developing a wayfinding program. Another thing that we found was that there were several programs that have directional wayfinding signage. So like to major destinations, like their activity centers or different parks and schools. So that was very common, what we found with our research there. Another thing was safety elements. A lot of the cities and other municipalities that we looked at use their wayfinding system as an emergency locator system. So a lot of times, someone's using the trail or riding a bike, and then something may happen, and either there's nowhere for them to pinpoint where they're at, or if they're calling 911 or someone to respond, they have a hard time finding them because there isn't, they don't have a mile marker or anything available to indicate their location. So, and this is something that we've actually recently been talking with fire and PD about is incorporating some sort of safety element into this program as well. The biggest thing that we found was that there was uniformity. You know, in Sugar Land we have several trails in our parks, but we also have a lot of trails outside of our parks. And so what we want to do is make sure whatever wayfinding we come up with, it's cohesive. You know, if you're on a trail outside of a park, once you get to the park, you still have some consistency with the wayfinding, people are familiar with it, and, you know, it just looks uniform. Next slide, please. So what we did, we have a CIP project currently. It's wayfinding for pedestrian and bicycle routes. And so we hired a consulting firm to help us develop 3 different concepts to choose from. A lot of departments have been involved with developing these concepts and you know, materials, like all the details that would go into these and what they would be used for. And so this first option we have here is a brown background, but it's also it's also consistent with what we have currently on the roadway. So you see the rounded bottom. You know, that's something we wanted to incorporate into this design, not do anything totally different, but something that's a little different, but also consistent with what we currently have on our roads. Another feature that we wanted to incorporate in this was some of the design features in the wayfinding within Cullinan Park. You know, that was something that already had a lot of the city's branding. You know, they're very nice signs, and so we figured we'd take what we see in Cullinan Park and also on the roads and kind of make something for the trail system. So this first option, like I said, it's a brown background with the rounded bottom. Next slide, please. The second option is a green background with a rounded bottom. Now, did several surveys, surveyed, you know, several departments just to kind of get an idea of what, you know, what people like and what people would prefer. And this option B, the green with the rounded bottom, was actually the most popular option among staff. And so, so far this is the favorite. We think it pops, you know, with the green and the white text and everything. And so this is really what has been the favorite so far. Next slide. And this one is, you know, the green background, but it's a straight, you know, rectangular and square shape. We wanted to have this option because we want to be able to also replicate a lot of these in-house if possible. And of course, anything that's, you know, right angle, square and rectangular is a lot easier to replicate. However, it isn't as, I guess, it doesn't flow as well with the current wayfinding that's out there. And so even though it's square, it is still a nice option for us to have. Next slide. So one of the first things we would do once we decide on a preferred concept, we would like to do a pilot project. And so we've chosen an area on the north side of town. This is in the Sugar Mill area near City Park and Sugar Land Middle School. We chose this area because it's a pretty extensive trail system that's already out there. The city actually owns the ditches in this area, so it's easy for us to go in and kind of put things out there, you know, as a test. But it also, these trails connect to several destinations that are traveled to frequently, and this trail system gets used a lot. So we figured this would be an ideal area to do a pilot version for the wayfinding. And this is actually being funded through SL4B right now. Next slide. So other projects that you will see this, the wayfinding design incorporated in as the First Colony Trail project. This one is currently under design, and once we get that design finalized and once we have the concepts for the wayfinding, that will also get incorporated into this project. And so one of the things about the wayfinding concepts is that there's an area on each of the signs that allows us to kind of customize or make things unique to some of these larger trail projects that we have going on. Next slide. And also with Ditch H, which is currently being designed, that's underway. So you'll see these incorporated into that project as well. So again, it's about, you know, making sure we have the consistency among the trails outside of the parks, but also once we start, you know, over time, once we start getting into the parks, hopefully this will be incorporated into that as well. Next slide. So next steps, once we hear from you guys, one of the things we would like to do is pretty much get your feedback on the concepts that were provided and get your preference. And depending on what we hear tonight, we will move forward with workshopping this item with City Council and get their feedback. And then once we get feedback from both Parks Board and City Council, we'll incorporate that concept into the wayfinding program. So it'll become our standard design for wayfinding along our trails. And once we have that, we'll move forward with developing the design plans and begin implementing the pilot project in FY21. And then you'll start to see these come about as we start moving forward with First Colony Trail and then Ditch H Trail projects as well. And that's all I have. Any questions?
This is Kelly. Are we going in order with questions?
Can you hear me now? As we've done with prior meetings, we'll do an alphabetical check of the board members to see what their thoughts are on the presentation. Just in general, do you feel that you need to have the design preferences presented all together one more time, or do you feel comfortable proceeding with comments at this time? With a show of hands, you can say, would you like to see another summary of the design preferences? All right, everybody's comfortable with proceeding. Thank you for that. We'll begin with, I don't believe that Heather Gillen is Heather Gillen with us this evening? Heather.
Yes, I'm on. Hello.
Thank you. Yeah, do you have any thoughts on the trail entry designs?
I also prefer option number 2 or B, the one that was with the green background. I just think the green goes well with the theme and parks, and it still allows the text to pop out. I think that is my preferred option.
Thank you, Heather. Joan, what are your thoughts?
I concur. I agree. The option B with green, because that really pops, and the rounded edges are my vote. And I'm excited. What a beautiful project.
Yes, it is. Thank you, Joan. Kelsey Johnson.
Yeah, thanks for all your work. I also like option B, but I do think that option C is also a viable option, especially if there's a big cost savings with doing the option that doesn't have the rounded edge. I think that it's attractive with option B, but I think option C still works.
Thank you, Kelsey. Kelsey Lowe.
I'm going to be the maverick. I think all of the designs look great, but just from a personal opinion, maybe it's because my eyes are different. I found the dark brown, even though I wasn't a huge fan of the brown, I found that darker color easier to read from a distance. Like imagining if I was on a bike going down the trails, I think the contrast is a little great. I agree with the others, with Kelsey, that the square edge option would be fine if there's a big cost difference. It doesn't detract too much from the design.
Kelsey, may I ask you, because of where you do spend your time during the day when we're not in the midst of a pandemic, and you have great experience with an outdoor park-like setting, can you elaborate on what type of signage you have where you are, and has that worked effectively?
We actually did just get a whole bunch of new signage installed relatively recently. It was a pretty major undertaking, so I have great empathy with the Parks Department. We eventually chose a very, very dark background color with white text, very simple, so it was very clear. Slightly different design direction than what the Parks Department needs in this particular case. But yes, simplicity and very clear legibility were important for us. People just seem to love to get lost. I like the simple icons if possible, and as little text as possible. Those were all of our goals, because the more text on a sign, somewhat counterintuitively, the worse it reads. It just turns into a design rather than information. So those were all the things that we considered and eventually chose in our designs.
Thank you, Kelsey. And for those who aren't aware, Kelsey is very involved with the Houston Arboretum, and they have done a lot of renovation and design changes on their facility and their land. And that is why I asked her to further explain her thoughts, because they've obviously have already gone through that process. Andy Fan.
Unmute. Hi, everybody. Yeah, so to reiterate, well, not yet, but I worked with Kinley Horn in the past, and I know what they can do. And then also experience-wise, I worked on Buffalo Bayou Park and Discovery Green, and extensively work on wayfinding too. So exactly what Kelsey Lowe said, a lot of it is you need that contrast, because in nature there's a variety of colors that happens, like a lot of the green, a lot of the neutrality between green, grays, and browns. So you want something to contrast it, because it's nice to blend in, but what if you need that wayfinding? You need something to pop out. But again, something that's very busy. You want simplicity. You want the sign, to have bold, simple letterings, but not too much as cluttering. So if that makes sense, because you need some sort of marker to pull out, to kind of get your attention, to say, hey, I'm at a milestone right here. I need to kind of go off to the side and just see where we're at if I need something. So I would opt to say I do like the brown better. It might not be that exact brown color that I like, but I think that might work better for what we need it to be in the greens. And then also, I think the brown is good only because it's organic. I don't think there's really a cost savings in the beginning for that, but I know we talk about replacement wise. If we have to replace it in-house wise, it's better to just have flat rather than someone trying to cut that curve. But if we can, I think brown's okay. And that's about all I need to tell you guys right now. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you, Ann. I really appreciate everybody's comments. And I'd also like to say that I very much prefer the brown background for many of the reasons that have already been stated. And then the flat background would be easier for reproduction. But again, I have no objection if there's a curved, if there's a curvature to the signage, just to make it stand out and pop a little bit more in the environment. Now, does anybody have any other thoughts they wanted to add now that you've heard from everyone else? Kelsey Johnson.
I just wondered, in your research, Monique, did you find out anything around like which color backgrounds would tolerate fading from the sun better in terms of that contrast? So are we better off going with a darker color to begin with because of that fading that we would anticipate?
Actually, we talked about that when we did our walkthrough with PARCS at Cullinan Park. I think you guys had better experience with the lighter background, correct, William?
Yeah, a little bit better with the UV on the lighter background, but a lot of it has to do with the type of material that the sign is made out of. Like when I went to direct print at Fast Signs, a new technology where they direct print ink onto the aluminum versus the old style, which was like an applied with like a UV layer over the applied. It worked for like 5 or 6 years, but then that applied UV clear started like alligator cracking and really flaking off. So when I went to the direct print at Fast Signs, a newer technology, they're holding up way better. So to me, it's more about the material used in the process than it is about the colors. But Monique, I would say that the lighter colors do tend to hold up a little bit better because the darker colors just fade so quick, a little bit more quicker. Yes.
Thank you, William. Now, are you saying that in your opinion, the green is a better option than the brown because you consider that a lighter color, William?
I'm not sure that there's a difference between the green and the brown as far as the fadeness factor, as long as the sign is the material is right. Because I have that brownish color at the Oyster Creek Park and Lost Creek trails, and it's holding up pretty well. The old style signs did have to be replaced a couple years ago, and Finalizing did a great job revamping all those signs, and the new direct print brown, it's holding up pretty well. And I would think the green and brown, you might get a little bit more fade out of the darker. It just also depends on what kind of shade of green and brown you pick too. But I don't know that there's too much difference between those two as far as fade factor. I think it's going to come down to material and workmanship and design.
Thank you, William. Appreciate that. Monique, I hope that we've given you enough ideas or thoughts from the board to move forward.
Barbara? Can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Kelly.
Oh, Kelly, okay. Excuse me, Kelly. I apologize. Yes, excuse me. Yes, please proceed. Excuse me, Monique. Yes. Kelly is also a board member. Excuse me, Kelly, please proceed.
Just a thought. Given everything that everyone has said, is it possible to get some examples and look at them in the environment? Because I think that although, some people think that the brown and white pops more or green and white pops more, I think unless we see them, even through a photograph, but unless we see some examples out in the environment, it's a little hard to actually decide, I think.
Monique, your thoughts on that?
By examples, you mean like just something from another city or jurisdiction that has something already existing on one of their trail systems? Okay. Yeah, actually we have.
Or a prototype or something from the people that might make it.
Okay. I know when we did our research, we did find a whole lot of pictures, a lot of brown and green. So if that will help for you guys to see, we can follow up and provide those. I will say, I think the most common, just recreational period, I think the most common color is brown, because I know TxDOT, what they do with their large recreational signs that they have on the road, the freeways, they're brown. Like all of those are primarily brown. So I think, between the two, there's a lot out there that's existing that we can kind of see and provide as examples in different shades too.
Monique, however, you're speaking of on paper or through email or posting online for us as opposed to an actual sign?
It would be, we can email some photographs if you think that would help, some photos of existing signs if you think that would help. So I'm not sure if we would be able to get like an example sign fabricated and put out there, just to see the difference. We can explore that idea, but we'll have to go back and kind of figure out how we would do that.
Kelly, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, and I'm not advocating for an expensive project, but I just thought maybe even before it goes to council, just a photograph of, as you're saying, if there are a lot out there in the world already, TxDOTs or whatever, just examples of someone else's signs. I just think it's hard to choose with the kind of the fake background, So, and I'm happy with either one of them. It doesn't make a difference to me. They both look great, but I'm just saying if you're going to have other people making kind of a final decision, you may want to see if there's a way to do that with with a real photograph with a sign in it.
Monique, when were you anticipating presenting this to City Council?
Well, it would probably be in a couple months, because of their getting on their agenda and their schedule. So trying to get on the next available meeting that we can get on. Now, it's real easy for us to pull some pictures and provide either a briefing or something or FYI to you guys that way, or an email. However, I could work with Joe in PARCS to get you guys some photos, for an example. We could try to figure it out that way. But we definitely have a lot that we can provide. There's a lot out there.
Joe, would you be agreeable that to coordinate this so that the advisory board can see a little bit more distinctly what we're talking about today?
Yes, I just need to try to determine, what line of communication would work the best. If we're still several months off, maybe Monique, if possible, could come back next month and fine-tune the presentation just a little bit more, and then we could get a final recommendation, if that would work.
And if that would work, it would be helpful for us prior to the meeting to have an email sent to us with some of these examples in there, so we could more thoroughly discuss it at the actual meeting, if that's possible.
Yeah, I think we just have to see what all we had available and how we could share that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And these are signs that we anticipate are going to be there for a while and are going to be branding the way that we have our trail entries. So thank you all so much for your thoughtful comments, because we want to make sure that these work the best they can for the residents and support Monique and everything that she's obviously spent so much time doing. So thank you very much, Monique. We appreciate your presentation.
Thank you. I appreciate the feedback.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to item B, review of and discussion on the selection process of a recognized soccer association in Sugar Land. Joe Chesser, Director of Parks and Recreation.
Hi, good evening, all the members of the board. I was going to do a few slides just to recap what we covered in the last month's presentation. I introduced this topic last month in the kind of the general overview of youth sports and what they were doing currently with the issues with the COVID-19, and then kind of introduced the topic of issues that have been raised around youth soccer, primarily at Lost Creek Park, where we have what we call recognized youth sports associations throughout the city. And the one we have at Lost Creek Park, the groups have been there for many, many years. When the park opened in 1997, we had a group called First Colony Soccer Club that ran that. They were considered our recognized youth sports association there at that park. And by being the recognized association, that gives them some benefits. We really need to have somebody, one specific group at each park that can be the lead organization because of scheduling and parking at locations and just the entire operations that goes into it. We need one primary organization at that park for those sports. So that began with First Colony Soccer Club, and they evolved into a group called Eclipse Soccer Club. They stayed pretty much the same. I think they just knew that their boundaries were a little bit beyond First Colony with the additions of other subdivisions and developments in Sugar Land. They wanted to be a little bit more encompassing on that, so they changed that to Eclipse. And then they are recreational. When I say recreational, it's generally the more beginner kids that are learning to play soccer. They come out and kind of learn the basics of the game and decide if that's what they like to do and want to continue on. And as they continue on, if they're really good soccer players and they really enjoy it, they move on to a more competitive league of soccer. So we like to have a balance of both in our park systems, so we're serving our residents the best way we can. In 2017, Eclipse merged with a more region-wide organization called Houston Express. And then with the joining of the two groups, they changed the name to Rise Soccer Club. And so Rise has been at Lost Creek Park since 2017, the spring season of 2017. So next slide, please. These are just some images of Lost Creek Park in case you hadn't been there in a while, just so you can kind of see the quality of the facility. I mean, it's a top-notch soccer facility. There's 7 fields in the park, and due to, over the years, the abundance of play, there's 3 additional fields across the parking lot. There's a power line easement across the parking lot So there's 10 fields there altogether for soccer play. And then, of course, there's a picnic pavilion, concession stand, playground, the trail runs through there, ample parking, all the other amenities that you'd have in one of our parks. So next slide, please. So soccer's always been very popular throughout Sugar Land. It was very, very popular there at Lost Creek Park. And after the 2017 season and into the 2018 season, we started hearing and seeing a little bit of less play at Lost Creek Park. And then also Settlers Way Park, which is just south of Highway 6 on Settlers Way Drive, next to Settlers Way Elementary. There's another park, and it had always been used for overflow of soccer use because Lost Creek wasn't quite big enough. So a lot of times the smaller kids at the youngest age group would play on some smaller fields at Settlers Way Park. And we saw that over time there just was very, very little use of Settlers Way Park, and got to the point where they really weren't using it at all. Rise began to focus more on competitive play and lesser on the recreational type play, and we started to hear some concerned residents about the utilization of the soccer facility, and a lot of residents that were participants in some of the other soccer leagues around the area. Next slide, please. So we were approached by some of the other soccer clubs, and then they were interested, and they thought maybe the decrease in soccer was that there wasn't a lot going on there. They might want to, or might have the opportunity to work with the city on utilization of the fields. But we had conversations with Rise, and Rise was still active there. They just seemed to be not as active as they were before. And so these are the soccer clubs that had contacted us, and they all play at some locations here in Sugar Land. Although Dynamo Dash and All Nation Sports don't play at our parks facilities right now. They play at other locations. And the Imperial Soccer Club is an organization. We have worked with the Fort Bend Adult Soccer Association for many, many years, and they also utilize Lost Creek Park for adult soccer. They don't play at the same time that the youth plays, but they use that facility too. And the reason that we want to generally just have one association at a park is just because of the utilization, heavy utilization, and just trying to balance multiple groups has just not worked for us. So at all of our parks, we have one recognized sports association, and then we might have for specific facility. In some cases, like where we have swimming at the pool and Little League baseball, they don't share a facility, they share a park, but not a facility. So soccer being the primary use at Lost Creek would be one youth sports association at that site to talk about, or to be the organization that we would work with for soccer. Next slide, please. So based on the fact that we'd seen signs of less play and the input that we've been receiving from residents involved in soccer in the community and some former board members from Eclipse, we talked to all the various soccer groups that have shown interest, and we've kind of heard we've heard, of course, all the positives with each organization and what they think they could do to enhance soccer there at Lost Creek Park. And that includes Rise as well, about expanding on what they offer. We just felt like we were concerned that Rise allowed it to get to the situation that it got to. So we believe that it would be good to go out to the soccer organizations, let them, or basically we'd go out to the associations, we'd request that they submit us a written proposal about how they would see the operations of soccer there at Lost Creek Park, and then also utilization at Settlers Way. And we based this idea on how we go about selecting you know, a lot of times when we select consultants for projects, we do a request for qualifications or a contractor or a request for proposals. So we're kind of following the way we go about getting professional services for other things that the city does. And we send out a request for proposals, and it's based on a certain types of scoring criteria. We put together a scoring format for how we would judge what the information was that was provided by the soccer associations. We base that on the organization, the operations, bylaws, financials, and then board members and employees, and basically where they were located. And then from that, you know, that we would be able to make a decision from that. This is all information that we require of all of our sports leagues every year to renew their qualification as the recognized YSA for the various parks. So we're not really asking for anything terribly out of the ordinary here. If you go to the next slide, please. And so in the proposal, we would ask for various things that have to do with the organization, such as the purpose of the organization and their goals. If they're under a parent organization, there's some statewide and larger regional soccer associations that a lot of these groups are organized under. So we'd want to know who their parent organization was or is, and then want to know what their commitment and dedication is to serving the youth soccer here in Sugar Land, and specifically Sugar Land, because some of these groups seem to have kind of grown to where they're more regional and not necessarily focusing on our number one goal, which is serving our residents and the youth of our community here. We want to know where the organization is specifically located, because we feel like to best serve Sugar Land, you know, we don't think you have to be in Sugar Land, but we would like to know where your organization is based. And then we want to know any other facilities, parks, cities, agencies that they work with in other locations. Next slide, please. And so we would also ask some sort of operations questions about, you know, the operations of their organization. You know, such as really how many teams do they have, and how many are recreational level type teams versus competitive level type teams. And then just knowing how many players that they have, or how many they would anticipate having for each classification. And soccer is basically done by age groups. A lot of them it's called U10 or U9 or U14, meaning under that age group. So if a kid really excels, he can maybe bump up a group to play as long as they don't exceed that certain age group. And then we want to know how much of their percentage of the participation would be Sugar Land residents, what the cost would be to the players and the families to participate in their league. And we want to know a schedule of what they propose. Most of the soccer leagues operate a spring and a fall schedule, and then you know, they start their practices and training earlier in the year. So we'd want to know what kind of time frame they would be committed to at the Lost Creek Park and Settlers Way Park. Next slide, please. And along with that, we'd want to know kind of what would they anticipate for games per week and practices per week, and then what their overall, excuse me a second, my light goes out in my office, and so then I look like I'm in the dark. So so we want to know games and practices per week, and then what their commitment to field upkeep is. Soccer's very hard on the turf, on soccer fields, and we, the city, maintain them up to a certain level, but we expect the leagues to make repairs that are specific to the wear and tear on the facility and the turf, just to keep it up and keep it safe. We have concession stands, or a concession stand at Lost Creek Park. We want to know what their anticipated use of that would be, as well as what their plans for tournaments would be, and how often and what size would the tournaments be. We want to balance and have normal activities with the leagues, but there are some benefits to bringing tournaments to the area, bringing people into Sugarland for, to visit. Some tournaments bring people from out of town, and there's hotels, and they visit restaurants, and they shop in some of the stores. So there is some benefit to having some tournaments if they're of a pretty good size. And then we also like to know where teams would travel to Lost Creek from other leagues, just general travel of the teams. Next slide, please. So like I mentioned before, we'd want to see their bylaws, including all the bylaws of the organizations. These would be, all of these organizations we would envision as being nonprofits, so they would have bylaws for their organization. And then being a nonprofit, they would have financial reports. We'd want to look at their financials. And again, like I said, we're not trying to be pry into their business, but these are all things that we require to become a youth sports association or a recognized youth sports association here in Sugarland. So we just want them to be aware of what all we would expect them to provide in an ongoing basis. We'd want to know who all their board members are and what their responsibilities are, and then any compensated employee positions. Next slide, please. So the way we would envision this, we would send this request for proposals out and give the organizations probably a month to a month and a half time frame to put it together. We would allow them to ask questions, and then we would get the proposals back from them. And what we would plan to do is basically review the proposals and have a panel that would basically score the proposals individually, and then we would get back together and see how everybody scored the groups to see who we think are the strongest organizations to work with on soccer there at Lost Creek Park. So one of the things I would propose to do is include some Parks Board members, and I was thinking we would ask for 2 Parks Board members to volunteer to serve on the panel. And I think we're still a ways out to getting this ready to go, so I'm not going to ask for board members tonight to volunteer, but if you would just think about it and it's something you would like to do at a subsequent meeting, we can talk about that and line up who our volunteers would be. I don't think it would be a really tremendous time commitment. I think it would probably be reviewing the proposals and then probably doing a Zoom meeting and just getting together with folks and reviewing those and talking about who we think the best group would be. And then after that was done, we would present a recommendation to the board as a whole. And then at that point, look to try to get a recommendation from the Parks Board on which group we think would be the best group to work with. Next slide, please. And then once we made that selection, we would have them become the recognized group, which means they become the organization that we work with specifically for scheduling games and practices and working with them because they play under the lights out there. So there's some electrical bill involvement there with them, concessions, operations, all those sorts of aspects that we have to work with. We think to really be able to evaluate them and know if they've met their goals and objectives and live up to the commitment we believe that they've presented to us, we think that would probably be a 2-year period, meaning they would have two fall leagues and 2 spring leagues. And then hopefully everything would work out well and they would just continue to be the recognized sports association. But we feel like there needs to be sort of a trial period. So that's why we're proposing that we would look at it over 2 years and repeat the process if necessary, if we didn't feel like they were able to live up to everyone's expectations. And next slide, please. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or comments. Barbara, I think you're still muted. You're speaking.
There we go. Heather Gillen, do you have any comments or questions for Joe regarding the presentation on YSA soccer?
Yeah, I think the list of everything included in the request for proposal was very thorough. It covered everything that I could think of. I think it's important that you included, what percentage of residents are going to be involved, have been involved in their association. I'm always interested as a participant of, cost per player and schedule. So I think those are important items as well. One thing I may have missed in the beginning, but did it also include a request for how long the organization has been established? Was that in there?
I don't think we had it listed. We don't have it listed as one of the requirements. That's something we could look at adding in, though. I mean, if they have a lengthy history, that could be a good selling point.
Right. That was the only thing that I could think of that might be something to look into. So those are all my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Joan Hanson.
As usual, Joe was very thorough, and I think, too, the proposal is complete, and I stand on the shoulders of what Heather said. I think it would be valuable to know how long that organization has been functioning successfully. So that's it. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Kelsey Johnson.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the framework that you've used for the proposal, especially in comparing it to other city requirements, was really helpful, and it kind of just gives a standardized way of collecting that information and has it at the same level as other requirements from the city, especially since the city is going to be in this partnership for potentially a long-term situation. So I guess I might have missed it, but my only input would be in terms of how there has been some disappointment over Rise's low numbers, and also its kind of diminishing commitment to the residents of Sugar Land in terms of drawing from its residents and supporting the community here. Is there anything in the proposal that you could speak to, how those expectations, at what threshold you're hoping for capacity with this soccer organization, or something that kind of hedges a little bit or anticipates the possibility that does that make sense? That the city,
I think that's what we're trying. I think by trying to get some of that information out of their goals and objectives for running their league is kind of a broad mission statement of what they plan on doing, but then also kind of having to dig down and provide us what they anticipate in terms of number of teams, number of participants on those teams, and then how often they would use the facility. I think we could, with those sorts of questions, be able to retrieve the information that you're bringing up.
Mm-hmm.
I think we should.
I wouldn't want to set the bar so high, or put in some kind of almost like a threat, if you don't keep these things in order, then this is going to happen. But I do think that it would be helpful, just so that you're not in the same situation a few years down the road, to make sure all those boxes are checked.
Right. We really don't want to have to repeat the situation if we don't have to, but we don't want them to feel like they can get complacent and think that once they're selected that they got it made after that. So it's kind of why with this sort of a trial period, to make sure they put their best foot forward on the effort.
Sounds like a good plan. Thanks for your work.
Thank you, Kelsey. Kelsey Lowe, please.
I agree with all the comments that other folks have made. I have nothing really more to add. I think you covered everything that I could think of for evaluating a group. So, good job.
Thank you, Kelsey. Andy Fan.
Yes, ma'am. I pretty much echo what everyone says, because it seems like Joe and team. You've done everything. You set a good framework, and we'll see how the team comes back and kind of set themselves up to see how involved they can be with getting the information. So hopefully, with how the pandemic's like, they can kind of reorganize and come back and give you what you need. Oh, sorry, something came up here. Like the warning's going to shut me down. Anyway, so no, that I don't have much to say. I think you have everything set up pretty well. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Now, Kelly Reynolds. And Kelly, I don't know if it's just me, but your volume is a little low, I believe. If you could ramp it up a little bit.
I'm gonna try to lean in. I don't know if this helps. Joe, it was very comprehensive. This reminded me of something that we heard about quite a while back, which was the cricket teams, and that they were playing kind of far outside, I guess, Sugarland. And I don't know if you have, if anything has changed with their status, if they have fields closer into Sugarland now. But it makes me wonder if we might not, allow the cricket teams to use one or two of the fields if they're comparable. I don't know what cricket people need, but maybe there's another purpose for some of these fields if one of the leagues cannot take over 10 fields.
Thank you, Kelly.
I just want to let you know, we are working with the cricket league, youth cricket league, and we have them playing at Duhasek Park. And we tried to do, when we did the bond election in 2013, cricket was a big part of that. And since it didn't pass in the bond election in 2013, we're making the accommodations that we can for cricket. But we kind of back to we really need a single organization at a park due to the scheduling and the need. And the demand for soccer is definitely here. There's not a concern that we won't have enough people playing soccer out at Lost Creek Park. It's getting the right organization in there. But I think that's the direction we're going. But we haven't lost sight of cricket, and we are working with them. And we've got some other park sites in the future that we think would be accommodating to them. But that's kind of where we are right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Joe. And I would certainly concur with everyone's comments, and a lot of work has been done so far to assure that we'll get the right information from these various groups. But I did have one question about soccer activity this fall. Joe, is it too premature to even have any discussion or you to share any information with us of what's going to happen this fall?
There have been some groups practicing, but that was sort of started before the new spike over the last few weeks. Mm-hmm. So I really think that's really, really up in the air right now. Where we are right now today, I would say the chances of them playing are not very good this spring, or this fall rather. But right now we're operating under the governor's orders, and the governor's orders have allowed youth sports to occur and happen with some special attention to not really distancing so much, but just how they organize it. It's mostly how the spectators view the activities that are going on. That's why they've been kind of lax, or not lax, but allowed practices to go on. But the game situations are a bit more specific on how people have to be there and distance and wear masks in certain locations and that sort of thing. So I think if our numbers were to level off and start to drop, we might have a good chance at occurring. But kind of where it's going right now, unless it gets under control, I'm not too optimistic that they'll be playing this fall.
Well, thank you, Joe. I appreciate that update. Now moving forward to item 4, Director's Report. Joe Chesser, Director of Parks and Recreation.
Right. Slides, please. while the slides are coming up, one thing I did want to go ahead and highlight a project that is getting ready to, well, we just took bids on it. It's not one of the ones in the pictures here. It's the road and trail extension between Sugarland Memorial Park and Brazos River Park. As you know, when you try to go to Brazos River Park, it's very difficult to get there right now, especially after the hurricane wiped out the turnaround under US 59. So the road connection between Memorial Park, it'll basically come in at the roundabout as you come in off of University and Commonwealth. The road will extend through the park over to connect up to the road that's already runs through Brazos River Park. And then there will be a nice wide trail adjacent to the road so people can connect the two parks up. We got really good bids in from a contractor on that. We had 7 bids. All of them came in really well. We're moving forward with awarding the bid. We anticipate awarding the bid next week at City Council. And hopefully we'll be breaking ground on that in late summer or early fall. It's a project we're really excited about. We think with the heavy use at Memorial Park, it'll expand the boundaries of the park. It'll give people a lot more space to move around in, more trail to run and bike. So really looking forward to that. And so we're excited. And this is one of the bond projects from the 2013 bond election. So this will basically finish off this section of the Brazos River Park development for now. And so we'll make that connection and have an expanded park site there. So moving into other elements of the director's report, phase 2 of Cullinan Park is finalizing the preliminary design. The Cullinan Park Conservancies has agreed to a trail layout in a nature discovery area, primarily for children. And so they've finished their preliminary design. We'll be moving into final design on that soon. We've also been working with Gulf Coast Water Authority, who had committed to do 2 bridges across Oyster Creek. They're in Cullinan Park. Been in conversations with them. Those will be moving forward probably this fall sometime. So we're also looking forward to that. And William and Fonlin have been working diligently with Texas Parks and Wildlife on trying to get a vegetation management plan on White Lake, which is the main lake that you see there in Cullinan Park, which is shown in the picture here. In the picture, it shows it probably early spring or late winter before vegetation really takes off in the lake. So this is kind of a look that we would try to achieve year round. Right now, if you've been out there, you'll see that it's really, really full of vegetation. So we're working on a plan to try to address that lake and try to get it a little bit more aesthetically pleasing as well as a more healthy body of water. And we're working with Parks and Wildlife on that to implement a plan there. We've also been busy doing a lot of repairs out in the parks. The parks have been busy, but we've been able to get out and repair some playgrounds that were in need and just take care of general maintenance items on that. Next slide, please. Moving on into recreational activities. Our virtual classes online have really become quite popular. We had a big influx of people joining into our classes. We were at over 1,700 participants on some of our classes right now. And so we saw a pretty big increase from May into June, and we would anticipate that continuing to move on. And the numbers there are in the director's report. So we had 1,679 this month of June so far, and that was an increase of 117 over May. And then one of the things that we're also allowed to do, we follow the governor's orders very closely on virus-related issues and concerns. They do allow youth sports camps. So we've got 2 volleyball camps scheduled in July, and then a basketball camp also scheduled in July. And there's special distancing requirements and hand sanitizer requirements, and then entering into the gym, everyone will have to have their temperature taken before they can enter into the facility. So we've got protocols in place to keep people safe during these camps. Next slide, please. Also, kind of along the lines of virtual activities and events, the 4th of July had to go virtual this year, so it was something really unique for us. We worked with the communications department and put together a nice video with council members and members of the community taking the Pledge of Allegiance, and then a song that accompanied former fireworks shows that we have shown throughout the years. So we were able to show some of our past 4th of July activities in the video, which was really nice to be able to see all the events that we've been able to do over the years. There were some additional activities to get people interested earlier on in the day, some 4th of July bingo and other virtual activities. We also, our event staff, put together a 4th of July package for people. They could pick that up and do activities with their families during the 4th of July. We had 80 people who signed up for the packages, and 75 were picked up. So we know that we reached out to the community on those, and we were happy with the numbers that came in from that activity. July is Parks and Recreation Month, and usually we try to do quite a few activities, but given the situation that's going on, we've decided we need to make those virtual activities. So we have a sequence of things that will be happening later in July, like a concert that's going to be videoed and shown, and some other activities. So that'll all be happening on Facebook here later on in July. So our events folks are busy working on that right now. Even with COVID, we're keeping things moving and trying to keep people active and entertained and recreating. So next slide, please. And I'd be happy to answer any questions related to anything else that's going on. Thank you.
Okay, Heather, do you have any questions or comments to make?
Just a couple. So regarding Cullinan Park, you mentioned the trails and possibly bridges were starting in the fall. When would the construction be complete?
The trails will just start their final design. They've been in like a preliminary design. These are based on some funding that Cullinan Park Conservancy received from Texas Parks and Wildlife. So they had to get approval on the trail routes and stuff. So that was part of the preliminary design work, and they've gotten approvals on that. So now we're going into the final design. I would expect the final design to go through the fall, and I'd hope we'd be breaking ground in the spring on trails, assuming all the funding is in place to do that. And then the bridges, Gulf Coast Water Authority, it's part of their budget. We thought maybe the virus would have slowed this down, but they still seem to be on track for starting in September. And so we're hoping that in September, October, those bridges go in. And so they're going into places that aren't really developed now in Cullinan Park, but we'll be extending some trails to those once they're put into place. So hopefully those will go in. I would imagine it'll take a while to build those. They've got to build footings and then bring the bridges in. And they're the type of span bridges you typically see along a trail. They kind of come in together and they're set in place. I would imagine it'll take them 2 or 3 months to get those completed. So I would say probably close to the end of the year, I would think they'd be done.
Great. And the only other comments I had were I really enjoyed the July 4th video that you all put together. Thanks for everything you guys are still doing during this time. I really enjoyed Andy's cameo in the video. Yes. So that was fun to see. So thanks again for all you're doing.
Thanks.
Joan Hanson.
Joe, do we know who's going to be in the concert?
The band, maybe Kimberly will jump in if
Counterfeit the band.
What's the band?
It's Counterfeit the band.
Counterfeit?
Yeah, they're a local band, and they're all they all work, and so this is kind of their part-time hobby, but they're like a band in Houston called Counterfeit the Band.
Oh, okay. Thank you. I couldn't understand you. And then, let's see, I had a second question. I'll put it in the chat. I can't think of it right now. Thank you, Joe, for everything.
Thank you.
Kelsey Johnson.
Yeah, everything looks great. Y'all are still staying really busy, it looks like. I did wonder if you're still pursuing the accreditation process behind the scenes that we discussed earlier.
Yes, we are. We're working diligently on that, and actually, this does give us a little bit of time to be able to focus on pulling that information together. So yes, we are. Thank you.
Kelsey Lowe.
Great job as usual, guys. I'm excited to see stuff going forward, especially in Cullinan Park, just because that's my favorite park. I live 2 minutes away. My question is, you're talking about plant removal within White Lake, which is great. Are there any plans for doing more invasive plant removal, like on the land, or are we just focused on the aquatics right now?
Right now, we're focusing just on the aquatics. And that'll be probably a kind of a long range activity. We want to balance what we're doing in the lake. We don't want to have fish kill, a significant fish kill. So you have to do kind of smaller areas at a time. You have to do it certain areas or certain times of the year, what you can do and when you can do it. So we sort of see this as a very long range sort of plan we're mapping out with them. And it's also can be a fairly costly thing to do because you've got to get boats out there and, there's spraying involved with really any other sort of, we've thought about other sort of ways of managing it. There's just really not any other way of doing it. So we're doing that. I do know that the Conservancy is interested in some removal of non-natives and focusing more on native plants there. It's just, as you probably are aware, that's also a major undertaking especially at a site like that where so much of it is invasive plants. So, but that is also part of the long range plan out there.
Cool. Thank you.
Andy Ban.
Hi. Just want to thank everyone for putting all the stuff together, especially the little red, white, and boom thing was pretty fun because I did show the kids that. My kids did do a little cameo too, and they were very excited about it. And they were like saying, we haven't said that since school. Because you know how every morning everyone says Pledge Allegiance for the school. So they're like, and then they think about it for a while. Wow, it's been a long time since we said it, like years. I was like, yeah, I felt like it. So anyway, but they're excited to say it, and then excited to see themselves there. And then they did go on to their online stuff and talk to their friends about it. So it's the whole excitement of community and getting together and kind of being part of it. So it got the kids all around it for it to say, when's the next one? I was like, I don't know. But yes, then I guess that's about it. That's all I have to say about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Kelly Reynolds.
Saying thank you so much to all of you for all your hard work. It is obvious that you're doing a lot to keep the community happy and healthy. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. I too thought that the red, white, and blue was just incredible. You guys are so creative and clever, and it was just, it was neat that we had our own personal, right in our living room. We didn't even have to go out with the mosquitoes and the heat. It was pretty cool. The only question I had about the report, Joe, was to ask the open space master plan report, the draft. Will we be having an opportunity to see that perhaps before our next meeting?
Basically that's just basically what is on there is that's an exercise we go through annually. It's just more of a report back to city management on what's been checked off from the master plan. We could do an item on it to do an overview to the board sometime on the progress that we've made from the master plan since it was approved. We could do that sometime.
Yeah, whatever works with your schedule, I think that'd be wonderful to see what the progress has been. And on behalf of the whole advisory board, I really want to thank you, Joe, and your assistant directors, Kimberly and William, and your staffs, for all that you've been doing in these very unusual times. I've been able to participate in the Zoom classes. I've been out to Cullinan Park several times, watching the 4th of July activities. It's pretty awesome that you guys are really still making our city a wonderful place to recreate. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I'll pass along the compliments to all of our staff. We appreciate that.
Oh, please do. Please. Oh, there. Thank you, Tricia. I see Tricia's doing this there. And there being no further business before the board, do I have a motion to adjourn? Anyone?
I'll motion.
Okay. Andy, and motions for adjournment. And is there a second?
A second.
Oh, Kelsey Lowe seconds our adjournment. And thank you all so much. It's nice to see everybody's smiling faces. And apparently we'll see you again in a Zoom meeting in August.
That's what we'll plan on.
Okay.
We'll hear from us. Okay.
Thank you all so much. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody. Take care.
Bye. Thank you.